Each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane page. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm also joined by BGN's own film guru, Jonny Page. Give him a follow on Twitter at JohnnyPage9. Jonny, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. Despite doing the intro like a million times, whenever I hear you say BGN's own, I'm like, oh, he's introducing the guest first. And then I realise that is myself. But whenever we have BLG, he is Mr. BGN. So whenever I hear BGN, I just instantly think it's BLG. And I'm sort of like, oh, okay, I'm not getting spoken to today. Then I realise it is indeed me. Although I think I've been with BGN now for ages. I was looking back at I was trying to look up a rankings post of a running back that we were interested in the other day, and I was like, I've been doing this for a while as well. So maybe it shouldn't come as a surprise, Shane, but when the man in front of me is BLG, it still does. So yes, I am very well and on time as always, which is great. So yeah. All going well.
Yeah. Were you proud of me, Jonny, that I remembered our times changed at different times when I scheduled this?
Yes, because I never do. Ever. I'm sure I've told the story on the pod, so apologies. But yeah, the first time when I was a small fish in the podcasting game, and I managed to get Fran Duffy on, and then completely balls up the timings because of the time change. So I got a phone call as I was on the train home saying, are you ready to record? I was like, no, it's an hour, and never spoke to Fran Duffy on a podcast since. So that was my one true chance. So there you go. So the time changes matter. But yes.
I have a world clock on my phone,
so I can check you need.
A widget on my phone for my time and Johnny's time, just so I can tell.
There you go.
And I want full credit for that, because I do want the listeners to realize we're starting late, not because of my scheduling, but because Jonny is chronically late. But yeah. I digress. We are also joined by the president, the supreme emperor of Bleeding Green Nation. It is Brandon Lee Gowton. Give him a follow on Twitter at Brandon Gowton. BLG, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. I'm glad I got the invite after messing up last time I was supposed to be on and totally botched that. So I'm sorry about that. I did enjoy listening to that episode that you guys had. I was just, annoyed I couldn't be a part of it to be part of the fun.
See, what we're realizing right now in the beginning of this podcast is just that I'm the only one that's perfect right now. Just don't go listen to the prediction show from a year or 2 years ago, and it won't shatter that illusion for you. But always glad to have you on the show, BLG. Always good to chat with you again. And what we're going to do today, we're just going to sort of recap free agency. Jonny and I talked about a few of the big pieces that had fallen into place 2 weeks ago. We wanted to get BLG's thoughts on those, but also didn't have a show last week. Scheduling stuff with Jonny and I was pretty unavailable last week. And so now that the picture has sort of fully fallen into place 2 weeks down the road, we can revisit those and give a little more insight as well. So we're just going to start off, and I sort of tried to group these transactions in a way that made sense instead of just reading off a rundown. So let's talk first about what the Eagles have done at the tight end position. And so the big domino is the Eagles extend Dallas Goedert to a 1-year, $7 million contract. Lots of ambiguity about how exactly that happened and how they were able to keep moving this void that some people online claimed was immovable, and nobody really knows. But at the end of the day, Dallas Goedert is under contract for another year. Quite a bit below the value I expected, 1 year, $7 million. They made other moves before that, though. They signed Johnny Munt to a 1 year, $1.5 million deal. They re-signed Grant Calcaterra to a 1 year, $2 million deal, much to the chagrin of most of Eagles Twitter. They lost Kylan Granson to Tennessee on a 1 year, $1.4 million deal. And they signed tight end Stone Smart, spelled with 2 T's, who I just learned this morning is an actual person that exists, to a 1 year, $1.3 million deal. So, Jonny, I'll throw it to you first. You've been grinding the Stone Smart film, I trust. What are your thoughts on Stone Smart?
Yeah. How long do you want? How long have I got? 20 minutes? 30 minutes? No, I must admit, I've been quite lazy this free agency because the Eagles have signed a bunch of guys. I'm like, is he going to make the team? I did watch Johnny Man because he was an early one, so I was interested. And then when it was Goddard and Calcaterra, I was a bit like, there's really much else to watch here. So no, I can't give you a long Stone Smart scouting breakdown, sadly, Shane.
What
We
was
should
the
have got
line?
Stone Smart expert on the pod.
What was the line? Was it Ollie that said that Johnny Munt's the best tight end 3 in the league?
It was, what's his name? The old Vikings head coach.
Kevin O'Connell, right?
Kevin O'Connell.
Oh,
yeah.
O'Connell said that.
Yes. Yeah, I
See,
used that
Ollie
in the,
Connolly, Kevin O'Connell, it all kind of
different
runs
people.
together.
No, I use that in the BGN tagline.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's the greatest quote to ever describe him. Yeah, the tight end room is a bit weird, isn't it? We could probably do a whole thing on. I'm still my big picture, and we'll talk more about positions later on. Is I'm still not sure like what offense they're fully building the roster for, which is quite interesting. Which I think it's like the second Johnny Munt was signed, you're like, they're going this way. It's the most obvious, like McVay, this like sort of world. But then they bring back Calcaterra and Goddard, and the Goddard one I get because, as you said, the cap stuff is just so confusing. The Calcaterra one is a little bit odd though. Because if they're going in a full new direction that Howie Roseman seemed to embrace, it then feels a bit odd to have him here. But whether he makes the team or not, of course, I guess we'll see. But I think he got a reasonable amount of money, didn't he?
1 year, $2 million for Calcaterra.
So he could still go. But yeah, time room is an interesting one. It feels like a blend of like the old and, I guess, in Johnny Munt, the older, but new in terms of scheme fit, I guess.
Hopefully they just like flip Calcaterra to tight end 3 and make Johnny Munt the tight end 2, and I'll feel okay
But then you
about
can't
it.
be the best third tight end, Shane, which defeats the whole object.
If you're the best third tight end, you should probably get a promotion to the second tight end, right?
But then you're just a very average second tight end. That's not as cool.
Yeah, well, that's fair. And if it doesn't work out, you can just go back to being the best third tight end.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're the best third person on this podcast right now, but when we promote you to being a mediocre second person on the podcast, when BLG's not here, we get mixed feedback. So it is interesting, though. The Eagles, like last season, we were all looking at this being like, the Eagles have no tight ends under contract for next year. And unless they draft somebody, we're going to go into next season saying the exact same thing. The Eagles have no tight ends on the roster for 2027. So, BLG, what do you make of the tight end room and specifically the Goddard contract, but anything that floats your boat to talk about here?
Yeah, not to rehash last year, but like weird they didn't even sign an undrafted rookie free agent tight end, last offseason. Not that like fixes everything, but like take a chance, like get someone in the building to see what they look like on the off chance that, look, Darius Cooper, you would have said that's not a guy who would likely didn't make the team, and then he did. Anyway, it's weird because Howie Roseman talked about kind of needing to change what the tight end room looks like a little bit and what he values there. I think he was kind of clearly referring to needing to put some kind of emphasis, more than none at all, on blocking. But then you're looking at the tight end room from this year to last year, the difference is like Johnny Munt. And I guess Stone Smart, if you want to throw him in there, if he even makes the team. Johnny Munt even makes the team. I think Johnny was joking, our Johnny, not Johnny Munt, Johnny Page here, was joking on Twitter about like something about like, I was like, Johnny Munt's just going to block for the whole team. Like he's going to do all the blocking just for himself.
Yeah, we'll get to that. That was the wide receiver position. We're going to get to that.
Well, on that note, though, like, so let's go to Dallas Goedert. That was a big issue, right? Dallas Goedert not really being what he was in the past as a blocker last year. And you can speculate and be like, well, maybe, part of that's because he was on a 1-year deal and he had to take a pay cut, which understandably, I think most people in most professions would not be like super happy and engaged if they had to take a pay cut. It's not a good feeling. But he's back now on even more of a pay cut than he had last year. Like he's making $3 million less than he did scheduled to make at least last year. And he's a year older and he's going to be a free agent again after this season. Like if he wasn't motivated to block last year, what are we getting this year from Dallas Goedert? I think it was worth re-signing him for that price, for the fact that obviously you can split his dead money. It made sense to bring him back. I just don't really know that you're getting like a much better player from last year. If maybe you're just getting a similar player from last year, and again, this can all change if they draft someone, especially early on, and that certainly changes what that position room looks like. But if they don't, not only are you kind of feeling kind of like uninspired in the short term, but then they still have to figure out the long term of that position.
Yeah, it is just funny that all of the consternation around the tight ends last year, and the Eagles have the same tight end 1 and 2 as of right now. By the way, I looked up Stone Smart's PFF grades while you were talking here. Stone Smart's run blocking grades over his 4-year career. We have a 40, a 31, a 39. But last year, his run blocking grade was a 49. So we're trending in the right direction. We had that dip. We've gone up 2 years in a row by like 9 points per season. So
great.
Stone Smart on the upswing. Up and coming run blocker, some might say. So also, if Johnny Munt makes the team, I'm definitely going to refer to Johnny Page as Johnny Munt Page for the entirety of the season.
Yeah.
I'm going to even put it in air quotes on his name on the screen here. It'll be great.
2 Johnnies, of course. Just based on my Twitter, future Hall of Famer, Johnny Wilson as well, of course.
That's right.
Which we'll get to, talking about the wide receiver position. Yeah, do you want to go on to wide receiver, Shane? 'Cause I think you can sort of link them together, can't you? Because
Yeah.
I think you have to talk about them as a package.
Yeah, so the Eagles have signed 2 wide receivers. So they signed Hollywood Brown to a 1-year, $5 million deal. And then they signed Elijah Moore to 1 year. I did not see a number for that, though. Have you guys seen a number yet?
No, probably minimum.
Yeah. So Elijah Moore, 1 year. If the numbers aren't out there, it's probably a minimum. Hollywood Brown, 1 year, $5 million. And so, BLG, what were your thoughts when you look at the wide receiver? Is this just replacing Jahan Dotson? Are the Eagles positioning themselves for a post-June 1st move here? What did you make of just this conglomeration of receivers?
I still think AJ's gone. I felt that way after the season, like immediately, literally right after the season. And then everything I've heard since then has only like strengthened my belief in that. I don't know when, so we'll see on the timing, but I still think he's gone, which brings us to Hollywood Brown. And if he's your 3rd receiver, sure, I like that. That's fine. It's your 2nd best receiver. I do not like that as much. So I feel like they still have a lot to figure out there, assuming I'm correct, and AJ is indeed gone. Elijah Moore and the AJ Brown of it all is very funny to me. Like, oh, he's his friend, so that means they're keeping him. Like, I think it's really bad for Elijah Moore's chances of making the roster if AJ is also on the team, because this is a guy with 19 career special team snaps, has not played special teams, and who's he getting playing time over if AJ is here? It's not AJ. It's not Devontae. It's probably not Hollywood Brown. So you're looking at wide receiver 4 at best, and that's not a guarantee. So I don't even think Elijah Moore is going to make the team as currently constituted, and that could change if there's injuries and if AJ is gone, so on and so forth. But I'm just not really seeing where he fits in right now, and that's fine. You sign him, bring him in on an offseason deal, and that's not even to mention that they could draft a receiver as early as the 1st round, if not maybe day 2. So it's tough because I think that position room is just going to be worse than it was in terms of you're not going to have AJ Brown, and you're just automatically worse. So it's kind of a tough spot. I think it's kind of just trying to mitigate that damage as much as possible, and trying to you're going to feel good about Devontae being your number 1. I think everyone can agree on that. But everything after Devontae at that point is a little more suspect.
Yeah, if AJ is back, the biggest thing to me is I would rather see Darius Cooper be a wide receiver 4 than Elijah Moore. I would rather see what he's got, use him as a blocker. If AJ is gone, I don't like a wide receiver group of Devontae Smith, Hollywood Brown, Elijah Moore. Now, if you spend a 1st or a 2nd round pick on a receiver, and then I'm probably okay with that. Because, you can do I think I've talked about Devontae Smith's numbers and why I think that he could be a legitimate wide receiver 1. I think Hollywood Brown is a fine wide receiver 2/3 while you bring a rookie up to speed too, if that's the way it plays out. Now, I don't have any idea how it's going to play out, but it was interesting to me. The Eagles have been obsessed with having like a speedy vertical threat wide receiver 3, which is always interesting to me because Devontae Smith is a legit deep threat. It doesn't make any sense because he's not blazing fast, but he's so good in contested catch situations, such a good route runner. And we saw A.J. Brown take a step back in contested catch situations last year, but he's traditionally been a contested catch guy too. And so it seems redundant. Like, I would rather you bring in either a power slot that's going to be a really good blocker, can run some routes out of the slot, or bring in like a gadget guy. And I don't think Hollywood Brown is either one of those, but I think he's a perfectly fine wide receiver 3. It's just not the archetype that I thought they would be shooting for. Jonny, Munt, Page, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I hate talking the Eagles wide receiver position because the AJ Brown thing is driving me insane. So I've watched like the top 15 or something receivers. I've ranked them, and I always do for BGM, which I'll start posting soon. And I always post like where I take them, and for every single one, I'm like, I don't know, because I have no idea what's going on with AJ Brown. I'm like BLG. I think he'll go. I think, yeah, I find the Hollywood Brown stuff to me and the Elijah Moore stuff to me, they still feel like what the Eagles offense wanted to be last year type signings. I'm a little bit surprised we haven't seen like a bigger slot. And I just thought, Shane, to give listeners some love, I'd read out some of the replies I got to this wonderful tweet of mine. So I tweeted the other day when the Eagles signed
Jonny rant incoming.
And it wasn't a slant. I just said like, who's blocking at wide receiver? Because currently AJ Brown doesn't want to block. Devontae Smith's light, sadly. Hollywood Brown is light. Elijah Moore isn't going to block. But anyway, I won't read the 47 replies that I got, but I will just have a look at. There was Darius Cooper and Johnny Wilson. Obviously, Johnny Wilson. Picture of Johnny Wilson. Insanely idiotic tweet. It almost feels impossible this is real. So shout out to that account. Johnny Wilson. Obviously, Johnny Wilson. I could keep going, Shane. I'm keep scrolling. Johnny Wilson, please step forward. I've got about another 10, and another 5. You're an Eagles writer, and you're asking this question. Have you heard of Johnny Wilson? And a lot of Darius Cooper and Johnny Wilson as well, by the way. The Darius Cooper that may not make the roster right now. And I sort of find it sort of mad that, and although that was a joke, and shout out to you guys for making me realise why I spend more time in the Discord, but Johnny Wilson's one player. I don't think good offenses these days are like, oh, we have one guy who does that. It's very obvious. You can't just bring in Johnny Wilson when you're going to run outside zone and go, oh, look, they'll never know. Like, we've been here before. It's about having well-rounded, versatile players that can do a bit of everything. I love Devontae Smith as much as anyone, but I do think you have to acknowledge that you're at a little bit of a disadvantage blocking-wise when you have him. And it's nothing to do with effort. He's just very light. And when you think of, like, the Rams from last year and you've got Nakua and you've got Devontae Adams, you think back a few years ago to, like, Robert Woods and stuff. If you want to live in that world, you don't play for the Rams at receiver unless you're an adequate blocker. And Hollywood Devontae is light. So I think just like the fact that, although it's a slight joke that I'm saying, the fact every single person says like Johnny Wilson, I'm like, yeah, because he stands out as like the only archetype for who is actually a good blocker at receiver. But it doesn't mean anything if you can't actually like play. So I find the receiver room a little bit bizarre at the moment. I mean, when you look at it just like now, it's so lightweight. Like, I know these guys won't make the roster, but you just look at it as it stands, and you've got like Hollywood, Devontae, AJ, and AJ's not a physical blocker. Then like Covey, Darius Cooper, Quez Watkins obviously still there, Elijah Moore, like Danny Gray. It's just very, very light. So I'm in the classic remains to be seen. As much as if AJ Brown stays, you think it'll be strong, AJ, Devontae, and Hollywood is light. And I know AJ's not light, but if you're talking about like running more concepts where receivers are going to block, screen passes, stuff out in space, that is as light, I think, as you can get, because we've seen AJ and Devontae not block. And I still have this like picture in my like mind of the Eagles offense next year, and I look up and it's AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and then it's Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra, and Sean Mannion's like, this is the same roster as last year.
Better run all curls.
Which is okay if it's the same roster as last year, by the way. Like, that's fine. But I sort of thought the whole idea was they're going in a totally different direction. And I do just find it a little bit odd. I could very much change my opinion extremely quickly because they might go and draft a significantly higher tight end and Calcaterra doesn't make it, or AJ Brown might be gone and they might go and draft someone very early on who can block very efficiently. They're a much bigger type in the second round, and all of a sudden Devontae, insert new guy, Hollywood Brown and Johnny Wilson or whatever, and you're like, okay, I can see it. But I do just sort of hate talking about it because it's a little bit like, who knows with AJ? And it's also boring because it's going to go on for so long, because despite what everyone says online, it seems pretty clear to the cap guys that he's not going to go until June the 1st. So we're just left waiting, basically. It will be really interesting if they do draft someone in the first round or second round, because then it's like, well, he's gone. Like, it almost seems like at that point, if I was another team, I'd be like, I wonder how cheap we can get AJ if we, like, it's just a really weird situation. Yeah. I can't recall a time when it's like so obvious that a player can't go pre-June 1st but can go post. Yeah, that'd be my big thing, though. I just don't really know what offense they're building right now. But who knows? Maybe it's going to be way more of a Mannion blend with what they've done last year than we think. But it does feel a little bit samey, except for Johnny Munt, which the Johnny Munt signing is so obvious to me that they're going in a different direction, but none of the other players seem to suggest that. So, yeah, a bit of a weird one.
I gotta push back on something you said there, Johnny. You said that the Eagles can't just put Johnny Wilson on the field and ask him to block.
They can, yes.
But last year they put Grant Calcaterra on the field and only asked him to block, and he can't even block. So they could. They proved it last year.
Maybe every snap Calcaterra's on the field this year, they pass. Every time Johnny Wilson's on the field, they run. But they'll do it once, like every 4 games, and catch them out and go, yes.
How does Johnny Wilson feel about being a 6th offensive lineman?
Yeah,
That's what we
and
really
I'm sort of half joking about Johnny Wilson, but you know the thing in sports where when a player's injured, they become instantly better?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even know he was making the roster last year. I think you were at camp, weren't you? Like, most people wouldn't have even sure. And the fact that I've got 40 replies telling me Johnny Wilson, I'm like, I don't even know if he's going to make the team.
Yeah.
Like,
coming off
shows
injury.
how light the rest of them are.
Well, they probably heard somebody say at one point in time that he was a bigger and better George Kittle, so that's what they're anchoring to. So, all right, let's go to the offensive line. Nothing majorly noteworthy here. Actually, the most noteworthy thing was not a player they gained or lost, but it's Landon Dickerson's contract adjustment that essentially, as I understand it, was a pay cut in 2026, and it completely got rid of 2028 in his contract. So there was, talk about him potentially retiring this offseason. That seems to be a pretty solid indicator that the Eagles are preparing to be without Landon Dickerson after this season or after the 2027 season. So they do that move. They lost Brett Toth and Matt Pryor. Toth goes to San Francisco, 1 year, $2.5 million. Pryor goes to Arizona, 1 year, $1.5 million. And then I don't remember if this broke yesterday. I think it was yesterday that they re-signed Fred Johnson for 1 year. No amount was given. Fred Johnson had previously said he wanted a chance to start somewhere, so didn't think he would be back with the Eagles. That obviously didn't materialize. And I can understand why there wasn't a big market for Fred Johnson based on his starts last year. I tweeted out that was really good news for the Eagles. Because I forget what the number was. I think it's 13 games in the last 2 years either Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata has missed. And so having him as a backup swing tackle is good. And I had a conversation with somebody but didn't you dog him all season for his play and say you needed Lane to get back? I was like, well, yeah, Lane's great. You obviously want him back, but setting that bar for the floor, if one of these guys gets hurt, you can do a lot worse than Fred Johnson. And so I'm really glad to see Fred back. I think it frees them up a lot. And if they didn't have Fred Johnson, this feels stupid to say, but you almost feel like you can lock their first round pick into being a tackle. But now that Fred Johnson's back, it doesn't mean they won't go there, but it's no longer obviously they're going to need one in the future, but it doesn't feel, you can feel like you walk into the season and be confident out of those 3 guys, you're going to have 2 starters. So that was kind of my take on the offensive line. BLG, what do you make of the Landon Dickerson stuff, Fred Johnson?
I'll start with Fred Johnson because I think it was, had he left, all 3 of your top backup offensive linemen, you have your 5 starters typically and then your 3 backups on game day for 8 total, they would have all been gone. That's not good between losing Toth and Pryor, who wasn't great and clearly is an example of it could be worse at backup tackle because Pryor was a disaster when he had to play. And it was kind of insane that they ever put him in there like they did ahead of Fred Johnson early in the year, and what a difference that made once Fred Johnson came into the game. And yeah, not an ideal starter for a long period of time, but there again is a credible player and someone they can at least work around, or at least have been able to. We'll see what the post Jeff Stoutland era of the Eagles offensive line looks like, which is a big under discussed part of all of this. What does that look like? Does it matter? To what extent does it matter? I think it's so tough for the Eagles themselves to kind of move forward and evaluate Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson, because what do you do if those guys just aren't ever going to get back? I guess you'd be okay, they're shot. We need to invest in this, but is it really that clear to them? I don't think it is. I think it's kind of more like we're hoping they get back to something of approaching what they were in the past, and maybe if not that good, at least players we can rely on to start for us and not be a total problem point for us. So I think those are tricky evaluations. The fact that they went to Columbia is I guess good for the sake of they're trying things to get healthy. The fact that they had to do that and look into this experimental medicine maybe is not the most encouraging sign for their current health status. So I worry about that. I think that's something that even the team might not necessarily have the best grasp on in terms of evaluating where those players are at health-wise, unless it's just really bad news. So I struggle with that. And then I want to get your guys' thoughts on Tyler Steen, because I think that's a player a lot of fans just think sucks, and I think that's not true at all. I think that's very harsh, number one. Number two, I just think people compare him to my Mekhi Becton from 2024, who I think I liked, Becton. He was a fun player to root for sure. But the way people talk about him is that he's an all-pro. And why aren't the Eagles re-signing him? And it's well, maybe because he was really bad last year, and clearly teams aren't rushing to sign him now. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on him too.
Yeah, Jonny, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I think Steen gets lumped into I think when you put Steen in context, just quickly, last year, he played next to Cam Jurgens, who didn't play very well, and he played next to Fred Johnson for what, 3/4 of the year or 2/3 of the year. Mm-hmm. So I think he wasn't in an easy position. And I think he played better than people think. Mm-hmm. I don't have the PFF numbers, and I know the thing about blocking is it's such a hard position for the casual fan to look at as well. So I think PFF numbers and I'm guilty of this as well. If the Eagles sign someone, I'm more likely, if it's a blocker, to look at PFF numbers than I am if it's any other position, because I don't really use their numbers for anything now. But I think for blocking, I sort of get it. And I don't think, Shane, his numbers were great, but eye test, and I haven't gone back and studied him hard, but eye test was that he was pretty good. And I think that the idea that he'd be replaced or something, I find a little bit mad. I think he was definitely better than Jurgens and Dickerson, and I think if you have concerns about anyone on the offensive line, it's those two. Mm-hmm. I think Steen maybe just caught a bit of flack, and I guess because Mekhi Becton is a highlight reel blocker, he can get beat 3 times, but he can absolutely wreck someone in a running play, and Steen's not that kind of player. He doesn't have a huge amount of pop. I feel like his issues he sort of encapsulated the Eagles' offensive line issues in some ways. I think we were getting frustrated with no real pop, no real bang in the run game, and I think Steen maybe has got the blame for that sometimes. But I would expect him to be here next year. I'd expect him to start next year. I'd be very surprised if he didn't. I don't know about you, Shane, whether I think we see it quite similarly, that Jurgens and Dickinson were a far bigger issue than Steen was.
Yeah, Tyler Steen had a lower pressure rate allowed than Landon Dickerson did.
Yeah, I've seen this, so I don't know how PFF calculates their pressure rate, and I'd like to go back and look at pressures he gave up, because his pressure rate is really poor, but I think I saw somewhere, I should look it up, his PFF grades overall aren't bad, but the pressure rate is really high, and I find that odd, because I watched every snap. I don't recall Tyler Steen giving up as much pressure as the rate suggests he did. So it's a weird one.
Tyler Steen and Fred Johnson could not pass off stunts to each other. And I remember pointing that out throughout the year. And I would guess a lot of that, because teams stunted against them nonstop. And for what it's worth, I think the majority of the issue there was Fred Johnson. But, maybe PFF charted a lot of those pressures on Steen. But even at that, if you go look at his pass block, and again, not endorsing PFF, but his pass block grade was a 75.4. That's higher than Fred Johnson's. It's higher than Cam Jurgens. It's higher than Landon Dickerson for last season. And so I think two things are true. One, Mekhi Becton wasn't that good. I said that all last season. Fun player, will pancake guys, make some nice blocks in the run game, but he was not a very good pass blocker. And so people overrated him. And then Tyler Steen steps in. Tyler Steen is like the inverse Mekhi Becton. Better pass blocker, worse run blocker. But you look at the unit as a whole fall apart last year. And so people go, well, Tyler Steen is the part that changed. Tyler Steen stinks. Tyler Steen was without a doubt the best interior offensive lineman that the Eagles had last year. I think Jordan Mailata had a better year than Tyler Steen, but Tyler Steen was the Eagles' second best offensive lineman last year. If you discount Lane Johnson, who was hurt half the year, so we don't get a full year of data from him. So I'm fully on board with Tyler Steen being your starting right guard. You know, can you get a better right guard? Sure. But I think he's a perfectly fine starter. And on an interior O-line where you have major question marks about center and left guard moving forward, if I'm looking to replace people, that's probably where I'm starting to look to get replacements, not necessarily the right guard.
And just quickly, Shane, because I'm like you, I do think PFF's blocking numbers are okay, because I think it's relatively easy in some ways to judge. But like Steen's numbers are, and again, we won't do the whole PFF thing. We killed them on the last show with the Uche and the Blankenship, so I'm not going to go after them again. But like, he is better overall than Dickinson and Juergens. His run blocking is better. His pass blocking was significantly better. So 75 pass blocking grade, whereas Dickinson and Juergens had 62 pass blocking grades. Yet you look at Juergens' numbers, apparently, again, no sacks given up and only one hit. But then you've got a pass blocking rate of 62. And I'm like, well, if you're not giving up sacks, you're not giving up hits, what are you doing? Like throwing your head backwards into the QB? Like, how do you not have a strong pass blocking number? And I'll say, well, it's hurries. It's not. Apparently, Juergens only gave 11 pressures up last year on 873 snaps. Yet, his pass blocking grade is 62. Steen gave up 37 pressures, yet his pass blocking grade is 75. So, it's almost like then I think sometimes we just assume a pressure is a pressure. Everyone chants a pressure differently. It's a subjective stat. Like, it's not a guaranteed thing. And I think even PFF sometimes gets that. They always give someone like a pressure, but they're like, oh, but he didn't actually do that badly on that snap. So it's just odd. I'm going to base it on eye test. If Juergens' numbers look like that, fair enough. That's not the Juergens that I saw last year. But then, as I said, Steen's numbers are actually better in terms of the grading. So I find the Steen discourse a little bit weird as well. I think he's like a 6.5 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10. He's a perfectly fine, adequate, decent starter that I wouldn't be in a rush to look to upgrade. And if everyone else was brilliant and I was looking for the next best thing, yeah, you could potentially upgrade there. But I think they got bigger fish to fry next year.
Yeah, for what it's worth, if you don't like PFF, Sports Info Solutions has him with a lower blown block percentage than any Eagles offensive lineman except for Lane Johnson. So he was better than even Jordan Mailata according to their blown block percentage.
They're just numbers on offensive lines are odd. They are. I think the way you determine pressure is interesting. Even like when you give up a hit in a hurry, again, how you determine if that's one person's fault is very difficult. Stats aren't easy. They never are. Part of the tool we can use. But I think, to your point, BLG, I think some fans are maybe jumping on that pressure number because everyone likes looking at pressure number. And if you just look at that, Steen looks poor. And I think that might be where it's coming from.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's round out the offense because I don't even think the offense is the most interesting part of the Eagles' offseason so far. But they lose Sam Howell 1 year, $2.5 million to Dallas. And so then they trade a 7th-round pick to the Carolina Panthers for the Red Rifle, Mr. Andy Dalton himself. And it's not the same position, but they also signed Dameon Pierce to a 1 year, $1.3 million deal. So, BLG, do you think signing Andy Dalton trading for Andy Dalton makes it more likely that the Eagles are going to trade Tanner McKee? Or do you think this is just the Eagles always value quarterback and Andy Dalton's going to be QB3?
It's a lot of money to pay QB3. What's essentially almost $4 million? Like, that's not QB3 money. That is QB2 money. So that's a weird one to me. Apparently it's a conditional pick too. I just saw that yesterday, so I don't know what those conditions are, but we'll keep an eye out for that. My friend Jimmy Kempsky, excuse me, is usually pretty good at sorting through that, so I'm sure he'll get that at some point. It's a weird one to me. It's the quarterback factory, right? So you can never count it out of them just investing heavier than most teams do in backup quarterbacks, but it just feels like you would ideally like to trade Tanner McKee. And I don't say that as someone who, I like Tanner McKee, but I feel like almost what was the point of drafting him and developing him if you're just going to let him walk in free agency next year. Like there's more than zero value to that, because if he gives you 2 years of cheap backup quarterback play, assuming last year and this year, there's value in that for sure, because backup quarterbacks, again, when you pay for them, make real money. Like Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham last year made like $6 million. That's crazy money for players who are just clearly not even any good. So it's a weird one to me. It just feels like you're paying way too much to a quarterback 3, especially in the context too. This is like one thing if the Eagles, just like had a ton of cap space to work with and financials weren't an issue for them at all. It clearly is. They clearly are like in a situation where they have to be smart and are trying to be smart with how they spend. So I almost have to think that, not that like they have a McKee deal lined up now, but at some point they're hoping they can, or at least allowing for the possibility of that, because I think they do want to have someone proven behind Jalen if they do trade Tanner McKee. Like I don't think they're going to just trade Tanner McKee and then go with a rookie, let's say, behind Jalen Hurts. I think they want to have someone with more credibility than that. But I don't know if that deal's going to happen. Like we can all say, oh, like the Eagles traded Sam Bradford in 2016, but you can't count on that situation where Teddy Bridgewater got hurt like happening definitely again this summer.
Yeah, it's like at a certain point, I just look at it next to not paying Reed Blankenship $8 million, and I'm like, $4 million for Andy Dalton, $8 million for a starting safety that you need. I don't know, but I kind of think it would lead me to believe that McKee might be on the move, but that's so hard to say because teams that need quarterbacks, they're going to look to draft one, and so it would be strange to be banking on a team not getting what they want in the draft, and then you get into he's on the last year of his deal, and so what would you take for him? A bad team is not going to give you a second-round pick for Tanner McKee, and a good team doesn't need him because he's on the last year of his deal. So are you looking at like a third-round pick? I mean, I'd be okay with that, because it's still good. You got him in the 6th and had him as a backup for a few years. He played a few games, gave you confidence in him as a backup. You flip him for a third. I'd be fine with that. But it's just interesting. I wouldn't love it because it's in the conference, but the perfect landing spot for him to me is the Rams with McVay, and Stafford's nearing the end of his career, but it's like, why would the Rams do that? Because then you'd have to decide to extend him before you ever even had him play. And so, I just don't know how that logistically works out. But if I'm a bad team that needs a quarterback, I'd rather give a third for Tanner McKee than whatever I could draft in the third. And I do think McKee has a chance to be a good player in the right system. So I'm interested to see how that works out. Jonny, any thoughts on Dalton, McKee, Howell, or Dameon Pierce?
No, let's get to the defense. I think I would just say I'm surprised that Dalton would sign here as a QB3 as well. Feels like he could get a QB2 job somewhere.
Yeah.
So I feel like if he did sign here as well, or he was traded for him, I know, but he was obviously happy to come here. To me, he's good enough to be a QB2 still. Established name, people know him. I'd be surprised if he was like, yeah, I'm okay to sit behind McKee as QB3. That would be a weird one to me. So my guess is he'll be QB2. I think sometimes these things can like appear obvious in hindsight. So you're like, you doubt them at the time, but it feels like when they traded for Andy Dalton or whatever, I was like, oh, probably McKee's gone. So I think the only thing is just, as you said, what they actually get for him. Yeah.
A 3, I think that could turn into a 2 if he plays, or fall to a 4 if he doesn't play at all. I think he's like,
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
I don't know if that's realistic, if like teams would do that wide of a range, but that feels like the most fair thing.
I also know it's just we're Eagles fans, so we love the McKee stuff. But if, let's be real, he hasn't got much great film out there. So it might be, we might be like, oh, what a great signing. And other fans might be like, McKee? Like, yeah, I think until you've actually done it in the league, I think maybe, I might be wrong, but people who want like a 2, I think that's rich.
In terms of a condition for him playing, it's like, also, why would you trade for a virtual unknown at quarterback on the final year of his deal if you weren't going to play him? So I don't know. I think he becomes harder to trade because he's on the last year of his deal.
It is a weird situation, isn't it? But I just don't see why Dalton would be a 3 to me, anyway.
He reportedly asked out of Carolina because he didn't want to be a 3 to Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, which, again, it just seems weird.
So, All right. Well, let's roll on to the defense then. Let's talk first at safety. The Eagles lose Reed Blankenship. He walks to Houston for 3 years, $24.7 million. Then they traded Sidney Brown to the Falcons to move up 8 picks in the 4th round and 18 picks in the 6th round, which left them with one safety on the roster, I believe, which was Andrew Makuba, last year's rookie 2nd round pick. And then they re-signed Marcus Epps to a 1-year, $1.5 million deal. I'm not even going to ask Jonny his thoughts about anything here, so we don't set Jonny off. But BLG, safety, major concern. Do the Eagles have the weakest safety room in the NFL right now?
I think so. I mean, I can't say I know every team's safeties, but it's Marcus Epps maybe, and just buzz that could be Michael Carter, transitioning basically from having played nickel most of his career to a safety role, and Andrew Makuba, who I think has some promise, but is supposed to be missing most of the offseason due to injury, so that could stunt his growth too. And I think that's especially important in a year where he probably kind of needs to take on more of like a mental part of the game going into year 2. And, of course, he'll have the ability to study, but to actually get those reps out there on the field and put that together, like it's dicey. And maybe it doesn't matter from a standpoint of, I think Vic Fangio can help get the most out of those players. And as Jonny will attest to in some of his writing, I like Marcus Epps a lot. And he's a solid player. He's like a credible kind of player. He's obviously not a playmaker, a superstar, an all-pro, or anything like that, but I think he's a credible, or could be a credible starter. He's also older, so you don't even know how much necessarily you're getting out of him and what he has left in the tank. It's not ideal right now. Maybe it doesn't matter, again, like I was saying, if your cornerbacks are so strong, which they are, if they can improve the pass rush. I don't think the pass rush has enough as currently constituted, but there's still opportunities for them to improve that unit. Also possible that Jalen Hunt gets even better from year 2 to year 3, like he did in year 1 to year 2. It's going to be tough to lose Reed Blankenship. I think people are understating the loss of Reed Blankenship, which I know is popular here, a popular sentiment on this podcast. I think he's a guy that's just got like really underrated for some reason. I know he wasn't perfect, but he wasn't. But he made some plays. Like, it's not like he wasn't a playmaker at all. He got voted a team captain by the players. Like, his teammates clearly thought he was pretty good, or at least respected him a lot. That's not nothing. It's a little bit of a bummer. And as you guys pointed out too, I thought very astutely. Guess where he went? He went to a defense that was one of the best in the NFL last year for D'Amico Ryans, who I think any Eagles fan would tell you knows about defensive football, is a good coach. So, like, I don't think the Reed Blankenship doubters have like much room to stand on here. And I think it's okay letting him walk. Like, I don't think it's the end of the world. But you have to have some kind of plan. And so far, they don't really have a great one to replace him.
Yeah, I was prepared for him to walk, but I thought it would be a lot higher number. I thought it would be a cap thing, and it clearly wasn't a cap thing. I had said my walkaway number was $12 million a year, and they got him for 8. And so I also thought it was funny that the immediate response was, well, Michael Carter is going to play safety. Michael Carter has played 25 snaps at safety in his 5-year NFL career. And then people are like, but he played safety in college. No, he didn't. He played 75 snaps at safety in his 4-year career in college. So he's not a safety. I mean, you could try to move him there, but I think that's not the best plan to walk into. And I don't even know if that is the Eagles' plan, but and we'll get to this with the draft, but I mean, you can just circle safety. The Eagles are taking a safety in day 1 or 2 of the draft. They legitimately have to because they currently have 2 safeties on their roster. So
it also tells you what they didn't think of Sidney Brown. They barely have any safeties on the roster, and they're like, we can't have this guy. And I agree. I don't think Sidney Brown was part of the solution, but it's a tough look.
Yeah. All right, Jonny, you cannot mention PFF or Reed Blankenship, but do you have any thoughts about safety you'd like to?
Obviously, I'm glad they brought back Epps. I don't care for Carter yet. I didn't really care when they signed him. I got annoyed at people saying, Cuba DeJean's going outside because Carter's going to start in the slot, and I did a whole film breakdown. I was like, he's just not very good. It's the sad truth. He was good like 3 years ago. So I don't know why changing position and sticking him at safety is going to fix everything. I guess the Blankenship one, I thought more about it because I don't really get why they didn't bring him back. My guess is that maybe they wanted someone a little bit more versatile, and I don't necessarily agree with this opinion, but Blankenship does limit what you can do to an extent, and whether you think the deal is cheap or not, maybe they saw it as like, well, it's still starter money. So if you're going to go and get someone new, even if Blankenship goes at like a low cost, you almost don't bring him back. But I do think they're like a little bit risky in the secondary. I think communication's a big deal. I think Epps will be fine. But I think the idea that you draft someone and just stick him next to Makuba and you're like, off you go, like that's quite difficult. It's quite a challenging defense. A lot of it is like how long have you been in the league? How well have you played in the system for a while? So I think it's a bit risky, if I'm honest with you. I feel like the Eagles defense is always playing with like not a lot because the money just goes on the offense. Even like I look at signings like Hollywood Brown and I'm like, you couldn't pay blank. I know they're different things, but it's still like 6 million. Like it feels like the offense gets money quite a lot and the defense doesn't, and they have to sort of make do with the draft. So yeah, secondary wise, let's be real and say that if Woolen doesn't work out and suddenly Makuba and Epps aren't great, you're going to rely heavily on Quinion and Cuba DeJean. And maybe that's part of their thinking is that well, those two can do it and they are that good. So if you've got weakness around them, you can live. But yeah, I think the Michael Carter thing, as you mentioned, is a little bit of a nonsense. I think safety has to be a priority, and it's unusual for Howie to go into a draft with like such a glaring weakness. But if it was like edge and safety are like staring you in the face as they're going to be drafted higher. I don't love the idea of a rookie safety starting next to Makuba, so I think we might be ready for Epps and Makuba to start, no matter who they draft to an extent next year.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the defensive line. The Eagles lose Josh Uche to Miami, 1 year, $1.4 million. Azeez Ojulari to Atlanta, 1 year, $1.4 million. They lose Jalen Phillips, who they reportedly were trying to keep. I'm so glad they did not keep him at this number because Carolina paid him 4 years, $120 million. Best of luck to Jalen Phillips. Loved him, loved the addition. I would not want to pay him $30 million. Injury concerns and just production concerns there. Prior to free agency, they extended Jordan Davis on a 3-year, $78 million extension, and then they signed Arnold Ebiketie to a 1-year, $4.3 million deal. BLG, what are your thoughts in general about the defensive line moves?
And getting a third-round pick for Jalen Phillips, too. Like, you know.
Yes.
For also passing on that, there's value in that as well, which kind of offsets a little bit the cost you gave up to get him. Nice little bit of GMing there by Howie Roseman. Ultimately, I feel like this group is not done. Like they need more. They need more at this position. By their own admission, I would say the fact that they had a strong interest in re-signing Jalen Phillips. Like I don't think they signed AK, as he apparently goes by, Ebiketie. I don't think they signed that guy. And it's like, well. Like, we're done here. We did everything we needed to do, or except maybe we had someone in the draft. Like, no. Like, they need someone with more credibility, I still feel like, in that room. I have interest still in the Jonathan Grenard trade, depending on what that costs in terms of both compensation and contract. I would think just based on, like, the fact he had a down year last year, and he's in a spot where he kind of wants out / wants paid, is not, putting the Vikings in a situation where, like, they can just get whatever they want for him. But he can be had at some kind of reasonable price. And I also feel like the fact that apparently, at least at one point in time, they were letting the Eagles talk to his agent tells you like they're not that far apart from what the Eagles would want to give up from the standpoint of okay, it's realistic that we could even make a deal with you. We'll let you talk to the player and figure out a contract. Maybe that ultimately doesn't work out or another team gets him. We'll see. But I feel like they still need to add to that spot because I think Jalen had a great year last year. I'm very excited to see what's to come for him, but I don't think he's like your best pass rusher, ideally, on a team, and that's like a very good defense. I think you need more there. Nolan Smith, I think, kind of had like a lost year last year, coming off of the injuries that still kind of plagued him from the 2024 season. So I am hoping that he can get healthy and stay healthy and kind of show more of the promise that he did late in that 2024 season, which I almost think kind of gets like a little underdiscussed and undervalued now because that was a big part of that defense being really good is the evolution he took late that year. So if he can be something for you, obviously the Eagles have to make a decision on his 5th-year option, which I'm guessing they're going to pick up. That would be great. But all that being said, I still feel like you need to add more than what you have to this group right now. And if it's not a veteran and it's a day one pick, something like that, great. But I would like someone a little bit more established.
Yeah. All right, Jonny, what are your thoughts on the defensive line moves?
Yeah, very similar, I guess, aren't they? I quite like AK. He's one of the weirdest. Is that his name? Is that what we're calling him? One of the weirdest scouting reports I've done in a while because the guy has like a mental block when he wins, and the closing burst is like just not there. There's honestly, I don't know if you've seen it, Shane. Some of the tweets that I posted of him, but it's like he wins, and then there's like a pause, and then you're like, he hasn't, and he's a pressure, not a sack guy. I have finished up my edge rankings. I've watched a lot of edge stuff of late, and I am more convinced than ever that the Eagles are going to take one high. Are so many guys in this draft class in the first like 60 picks that I think the Fangio will love, and I think the Grenard moves make sense. But I also have a feeling that they're going to have a lot of guys circled on their board that they're like, he makes sense. He makes sense. And whether any of them will actually solve the problem, because they're rookies and they could be day two picks, but I imagine there's going to be one added very high because there's just a number of different prospects that fit exactly what the Eagles want to do. So I'm like BLG, I think they need more, but also they've got a very young front seven. And I think, to be honest, a lot of next year's success will ride on the young players getting better. They expect Davis to get better because they paid him a lot. They obviously want Ajomo, Carter to get better. They want Smith and Hunt to get better. And even, obviously, Campbell plays a big role in that. So it may be like they get better through development, not just addition. But it feels like they need one more in there, at least, as a straight-up pass rusher. Because Jalen Phillips was very good. And he obviously was very good because he got paid a lot of money. And everything you read is that the Eagles desperately wanted him back. That was one they seemed to really, really fight for. So, yeah, I think, I won't get into names, a couple of comments of players. Yeah, I'll do that in another show. But yeah, there's a lot of guys that I think the Eagles will really, really like at edge. So I think if Grenard ends up being too expensive, I think they'll quite happily fall back.
All right. And then let's go to, obviously they lose Nakobe Dean, 3 years, $36 million to Las Vegas. I think most people thought that was pretty a foregone conclusion. I know there was a lot of sentiment around bringing him back, and it just wasn't ever really feasible. But hopefully Nakobe goes out and balls out next year in Las Vegas. And then they signed Jonathan Jones, 1 year, $2 million. But the big move is they signed Tariq Woolen to a 1 year, $12 million deal, which is worth up to $15 million. I like how it was originally reported as 1 year, $15 million. But BLG, we talked some about Tariq Woolen. I did a film breakdown on Woolen in the Eagles Film Room Patreon, but what are your thoughts on the Eagles' acquisition of Tariq Woolen and kind of what it means for the secondary?
I really like the approach here by Howie Roseman, or at least what I perceive to be the approach, in that I think part of the issue with why they didn't pay Reed Blankenship is because they have to kind of determined him to be like a middle class kind of player in terms of like how they're building their roster with typically either kind of more minimum signings or like the big money guys. For the most part, they don't want that like middle range so much. Stars and scrubs, to put it more bluntly. I think with Woolen, this was like an opportunity where, and in the context too of the free agency class as a whole was not good. I think anyone could agree with that. Like this wasn't a class of very great players. So instead, where I think most people would be of the mind of, well, we need a safety. So we need to sign just like the best safety that's available. Well, like that's not always necessarily the best move because you could be paying a pretty high value for the guy who just happens to be the best at that position, but isn't actually all that special. Is maybe just a guy. And with Woolen, I think this is a guy who at his best has been like one of the very best, most elite cornerbacks in the league, like that kind of level of upside. So I like shooting for that there. I think the fact that he didn't get a multi-year deal kind of speaks to the downsides that we've seen from him in terms of lack of discipline and inconsistency, personality, all those kind of things baked in. But I mean, the risk there is mitigated for the Eagles, considering it's just a 1 year deal. If it goes poorly, you're not making this big commitment for years to come. So I'm really intrigued and bullish on Tariq Woolen. When you look at, again, some of his numbers, like they're off the charts. Like they're like really, really, really good. And I am going to believe that being here with Vic Fangio, The Eagles lose Christian Parker, so that's a tough loss. Maybe I feel a little bit better if Christian Parker's here, but still, I think that secondary as a whole, like I just think, for as much as there's downside, I'm choosing to lean with the upside in this one, and feeling like any kind of downside that comes with this is worth the risk, because when you have Reek Woolen and you have Cooper DeJean and you have Quinion Mitchell, like that's an awesome group. They could absolutely just shut down wide receivers and make a ton of big plays on the ball. So I'm really excited to see it, and I think that was definitely a risk worth taking.
All right, and then the biggest move perhaps of the offseason, the Eagles re-sign punter Braden Mann to a 4-year, $14 million deal. Jonny asked me if I would let him break down a few punts on air, and I told him, no, we're not going to have time. But Jonny, did you have any thoughts on Braden Mann returning?
No, except it's quite a lot of money. There is a punter analysis guy on Twitter, and he doesn't like him very much, which I was a bit like, oh, if I'm going to give a punter a decent amount of money, I'd like him to like my punter. But I have enough stress in my life to care about the Eagles signing a punter, so I'll pass on Braden Mann analysis this week.
All right.
They still need a long snapper, by the way. No long snapper right now.
Yeah. Interesting.
Biggest
need. First round pick. Go get a long snapper.
Boom.
All right. So that brings us to the Eagles are headed into the draft with, I'm sure there'll be little moves here and there, but you're probably not going to see much roster change between now and the draft. So the Eagles have the 23rd pick in the first round. Then they have pick 54 in the second round, 2 picks in the third, pick 68 and pick 98. And then they have 2 fourths, 2 fifths, and a 6th round pick. Just general state of the roster. I posed this question in the Discord the other day. I think it's a good way to think about this. Obviously, you don't reach for needs. You kind of go best player available, and that's how good teams draft. But assuming there was an equivalent player at every position, and so you could realistically draft any position, what would your ideal scenario be for your first 3 rounds picks? So I'll throw that out. I'll talk first because I've thought about it, and I didn't include this in a rundown because I just thought of it as a good way to do this. So, I think safety in the first round would be the ideal, because the Eagles, like we said, that's a place where I'm not sure they have a starter, much less the 2 starters that are required. So I think first round pick being a safety would be the ideal for me. It gets tricky because we don't know the Brown situation. I'm just going to do mine assuming Brown stays. I think it's 50-50. I believe a little more there's a chance he stays than you guys do. So I'm probably going to offensive tackle, second round. You got a long-term need there with Lane Johnson. You've got maybe a short-term need. And then third round, give me an edge rusher. So I think that would be my ideal 1, 2, 3 is safety, offensive tackle, edge rusher. If you told me for sure that A.J. Brown is gone, then I would probably swap out that offensive tackle for a receiver. But that's kind of the way I view the needs on the roster right now. BLG, where are you at, just in an ideal world?
I would say receiver 1, because again, I think A.J.'s gone, and I just don't know what you have if you don't have him, other than Devontae. I don't feel great about anything else. So I would go that. Again, this is not realistic in terms of the history of the draft, but I think offensive tackle round 2, I think realistically they are going to want to trade up for 1, especially because in years past they've wanted to do this. They've wanted an offensive tackle. I think they've kind of hoped more they would, fall to them, or at least fall within range, and that hasn't happened. I think that is greasing the skids for them this year to be a little bit more aggressive about knowing they need to go up and get someone, depending on how the board shakes out, with that caveat always included. And then third round, I'd include edge rusher there, because I just feel like they still need to do more there. And with Jonny talking about the depth of this class, I think you might be able to get one there and feel good about it still.
All right. Jonny, what about you?
Yeah, I might be unpopular and not put tackle there just because Fred Johnson's back. I might just sort of be like, do you know what? They've got too many needs already. I think I might go edge round 1, honestly. I know I've said there's good depth, but I'm sort of a little bit worried about pass rush this year, and even run just in general the edge room. I'm a little bit concerned about it. I think they badly need one more. Then I think I would go receiver because I'm also of the opinion that AJ Brown would go, and then I'd go safety. I think worst case scenario, you can at least live with Epps for a year if you have to at safety. So I think the other two might be more pressing, assuming AJ goes. I would also love to throw tight in there somewhere, but I just can't see with the current state of the roster that it's really a massive need because they seem to have their free, whether I agree with it or not. But I would love for there to be a space at tight end for them to look early as well, but I don't think that's realistic.
If they draft a tight end, they'll have a hard time signing Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra to one-year extensions next offseason.
Yeah, we'll be back in the same position.
And then last thing I'll mention, they're currently in line for a third-round comp pick in 2027 for losing Jalen Phillips, and a sixth-round comp pick for losing Reed Blankenship. And then they would have had comp picks for losing Nakobe Dean and Jahan Dotson, but those were canceled out by the Tariq Woolen and Arnold Ebiketie sightings. So currently in line for a third and sixth round comp pick in 2027. So there you have it. Free agency recap, up to date with everything. However, I kind of hijacked that last question and got us out of the general state of the roster. So I will throw it around the horn for final thoughts. Anything we didn't mention that you guys want to, anything you have coming out that you want to plug, please feel free to do that. BLG, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, nothing to plug other than bleedingyournation.com. Check that out. It's always a good website to check out, mostly just for Jonny's articles, honestly. No, everything there is pretty good. Obviously, as well, if you're not signed up for an account, this should be obvious, but sign up for an account because it's free. And then when you're logged into BGN, you automatically see fewer ads than you would if you're logged out. So unless you like ads, which, I'm sure, everyone has ads in terms of sponsors and stuff, and we like those ones. But just in general, if you just want a more lighter ad experience, log into an account on bleedinggreennation.com. It is free, and it's a good way to hop in the comments, too, and comment on Jonny's articles. So do that. I said no plugs, and then I gave a plug for BGM. But my final thought, Eagles related, is the fact that I'm in this spot where I really feel like normally when I'm kind of feeling down on the team, I might also feel down on their kind of trajectory as a whole. That's not the case. I'm in a weird spot where I feel like I'm kind of down maybe, or feeling kind of, the arrow might be pointing down in the short term, but I still have this belief in them long term because of what we've seen, quite frankly, from Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman and their ability to win a Super Bowl with two different head coaches and two different quarterbacks. I kind of believe in that framework and the intelligence that they have going on overall. But I have some questions about, I think, where the roster might be heading. And Shane, you actually made this point before the podcast. I don't think you brought it up, but I'm going to bring it up here. Is the fact that it kind of seems like they might realize they might be in a point of transition almost because they haven't signed anyone to more than a one-year deal. I think that kind of tells you where they might think this roster is at. And I think obviously they want to win. I'm not saying they're not trying to win this year. You brought back Vic Fangio. You're you're trying to win. But I also think they might be looking at this, and part of Howie's job is to know that it's not just about one season, but looking at this multi-year window and looking down the line. And I think they're in a spot this year where, maybe they bounce back in a big way. They follow the pattern of the past couple of years, where it's like disappointing year, Super Bowl, disappointing year, Super Bowl. Maybe it's that, but I kind of think they're in a spot where things might get a little bit worse before they ultimately get better in the bigger picture. Of course, I reserve the right to change that opinion as the offseason goes along and we learn more. But right now, I'm kind of just not necessarily as high on the 2026 Eagles as I am maybe the years beyond that.
All right. You mentioned ads, not wanting to see ads. It's funny. My oldest daughter will watch football with us as long as we're watching a game live. But if we're not live and I'm fast forwarding commercials, she won't watch. She gets frustrated because she's there for the commercials. So,
wow.
So we still got a ways to go in terms of getting the football, the love for the game in there. Now it's just like, okay, I'll sit on the couch with the family if I can watch commercials sometimes. And she's very much disappointed if I'm fast forwarding those. So, okay, Jonny, any final thoughts? Anything you've got coming out that you want to plug?
Draft rankings, basically. So I'm trying to this year to be even more Eagles specific in my draft stuff. Every year I try and get more Eagles specific, and I think I've got a few ways of doing it this year. So more like Eagles draft rankings rather than scouting reports, because there's enough of them online. More like how I see the board and where sort of the Eagles will fit. Yeah, I think most positions hopefully won't change much between now and then either. I don't like publishing them too early because there'll be a signing that will wreck everything. So I'll like publish the edge rankings and say where I'd take them, and then they'll trade for Jonathan Grenard, and I'll have to update everything. So I normally wait as long as I can to post them. But yeah, that's basically it. And Brandon's right to plug the BGM website as well. The feed's really good on there, especially if we're getting off social media like I am of late. I've had a big off-season social media purge because the Blankenship and Johnny Wilson stuff was not good. And I was sick of looking at it. So yeah, you guys know the Patreon. I spend most of my time in the Discord, but the feed is really good as well if you're trying to get off Twitter, if you're one of them, like I am, because you're sick of too many responses talking about something that you don't care about. So yeah, I'll probably start next week, I imagine, with draft rankings, and then yeah, on the Patreon we'll have some draft videos out and stuff. So it should be good.
Yeah. All right, and obviously stay tuned to the Eagles Pinpool Network. Mark and I just dropped our defensive back rankings this morning, our top 10 defensive backs. Obviously something that could interest the Eagles. We've got 3 positions left. We've got running back, wide receiver, and offensive line that we'll be doing in the coming weeks. And of course, there's other draft coverage on the network as well. The Eagles Film Room Patreon has exclusive content. We're going to be doing a mailbag for the Patreons next week. So Patreons, go over to the Discord and submit your questions. If you're not a part of the Patreon community, you should come and check it out. We have a $3, $5, and $7 a month tier with various perks, but the $3 tier gets you access to the Discord, which is where we hang out and chat a lot, have a great community there. It also gets you ad-free versions of all of our podcasts, including the mailbags, which don't go onto the public podcast feed. So you can grab a free 1-week trial of any of those and come check it out before you pay. We think you'll want to stick around. So that's going to do it for this one. Big shout out to BLG for joining, for waiting on Jonny. No matter how long it takes, he said, I'm here for the show, and we always appreciate that. Always good to have you on, BLG. I'm sure we will circle back after the draft again, as we usually do. So be sure you are following these guys on Twitter. BLG is at Brandon Gowton. Jonny is at JohnnyPage9. I am at Shane Half NFL, and we will catch you guys next time.